Alright, welcome to the DSC show. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, they are the only undefeated team currently in the National Football League, falling 8 wins in a row. Even though their bye week around week 6, they have still didn't lose momentum after their last game, defeating the Houston Texans that are 1-6-1 after their tie with the Indianapolis Colts. Fell short after keeping it 14 apiece around the first half, apparently closing it out with a great defensive stoppage. 2 sacks on Davis Mills, winning 29-17. They kind of keep going in one-win at least double-digit differentials after beating the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then they beat the Houston Texans after their bye. And this is after they lost to Cooper Rush, beat Cooper Rush, the starting quarterback, after a injury over Dak Prescott. Beat the Arizona Cardinals. That's been completely underwhelming over the regular season. Jacksonville Jaguars. They beat the Commanders around week 2. Then they had the worst defensive unit in the NFL out of the Detroit Lions over week 1. But that was also a close game that they kept 35-38 in a close one, where that was probably the best performance over Jared Goff. Jamal Williams went off in that game. I think they allowed 400 yards passing, while it was about 200 yards rushing of total offense. Jared Goff went 215 yards with only 1 interception over 2 passing TDs. And he nearly tied in the QBR with a guy with no picks and no passing touchdowns. Only, I think, a rushing touchdown over in the first half for Jalen Hurts. And I'm not denouncing the credit where it's due, but the Eagles allowed 144 rushing yards. The same thing here that we saw over their last game. It wasn't anything different. What we saw from Jamal Williams week 1, Dameon Pierce in week 9 coming up rushing for 135 rushing yards. I'm shocked he didn't win offensive player of the week for the AFC. That went to that shutout that we saw in Carolina. Absolutely appalling for Carolina to get blown out like that. Well, I think we had 166 rushing yards in that game, and it wasn't involving the Steelers, no. It was kind of one-sided. Like, completely one-sided that game was, but no one was expecting that much of a shutout for the Carolina Panthers after they tried to blow up the whole team over the deadline. Literally. At least Chicago, they went balls deep in a close game around week 9, even though they got rid of Gibson. They got rid of their whole front 5 while Khalil Mack was gone around the offseason. And they still scored over 30 points and nearly beat the Miami Dolphins of a 3-point differential, with Justin Fields rushing for 179 yards as a quarterback. And he came over a 40-yard rushing touchdown where he broke over 3 defenders' tackles. So you can't be serious here. And yes, it was Joe Mixon that came rushing 153 yards. 20-yard differential he had over Dameon Pierce. That's been an outstanding rookie running back. Hopefully he can stay consistent. That's all I can say. We can't say that about the Colts. Because they've been probably the most unwatchable team next to the Houston Texans in the AFC South. And here's the Eagles, where they have no unproven commodity. The Packers already been a disappointment. They'll be off on the road against Indianapolis next week after their matchup against the Commanders. And they'll be off actually facing definite talent in the second half of the season. Dak Prescott will hopefully be still healthy around December 24th when they face them in Week 16, and then they'll be off on the road against difficult places to play with cold weather, like Chicago or MetLife. Soldier Field and MetLife are cold come December. That's brick weather to be in. And then they got the Packers. Of course, the Packers are nothing to talk about. They haven't been, the most successful. Like, if we're allowing the Vikings to go 7-1, and the Packers to be so garbage as to not even be, I think, number 2 in their division right now? They're still number 2 in their division. The 3-6 tied with the Chicago Bears. And even though the Bears are ass, they at least keep close games. Even though now the Packers shared a loss with the goddamn Vikings. No, with the Lions. And they're still with a better record. After two terrible red zone interceptions over passing plays by Aaron Rodgers. The only positive is he hasn't lost to the Bears yet. Because that was a home game. And that was just coming out of their close loss against Minnesota. And I had many predictions that Minnesota could lead over the division. And it had nothing only to do with only one player missing from the team. But back to the Eagles. Many of them, people thought they were expecting to go 6-2-1, have a bit of a underwhelming season. We developed more of the offensive ability that we got over Devontae Smith. Over trading for A.J. Brown, they're just an outstanding offense to mix with. No one's denouncing the talent. But I just feel like it's a bit overrated, in my opinion, out of teams that are surefire contenders, out of the Buffalo Bills. Still, even with losing Tyreek Hill, the Kansas City Chiefs. Tennessee Titans are still up there, even though I feel like they're going to be an underwhelming division leader again, being probably the worst record with the division leading, with being division leaders of the AFC South, going 5-3. San Francisco 49ers are still sub 500, but still with the most postseason success out of majority of the division leaders. Out of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Eagles, we haven't seen them have a successful postseason since 2017. Or the Baltimore Ravens. There's still a chance that even though the Bengals are division leaders and they're still with an offense, I still feel like it's fringe to still call them contenders. And anybody that still feel like the Raiders, have any shot. People think that there's any shot for the Raiders to take over the AFC, the AFC West. With this much going on, you're delusional. Because they just choked a 20-point lead against the Jacksonville Jaguars. What's wrong with them? What's wrong with them? I want to understand. I need to understand right now. They lost in a 2-point differential against Tennessee. Arizona pimp slapped them. They choked 3 different games, especially over that penalty-riddled game they had against the Kansas City Chiefs, where they got killed over that roughing the passer debacle when they were holding over a majority of the lead around until the second half. And then Travis Kelce went off getting 4 receiving touchdowns. Then they got shut out just a few weeks ago around the New Orleans Saints. And then this week they got the Colts. It's going to be possibly a long November because the Colts, at least, are more disciplined. Of course, if anybody didn't hear the news, Frank Reich has been relieved of his duties as head coach for the Indianapolis Colts, and who will be taking over as interim head coach will be former All-Pro center Jeff Saturday. And if you don't feel like that's an important news that just a former player just takes over a position, who else doesn't know the franchise or the system for the Colts? As a former center, he used to play with Peyton Manning for the Indianapolis Colts for a tenure. Usually, player coaches are probably the biggest, double-edged sword in the NFL, or even sports franchises in general, like we get with Tyronn Lue or Steve Nash, even though Tyronn Lue has an NBA championship in his name now, since being the head coach. Sure, dude, shit him as he won. He's been able to make decent relationships and good and successful seasons with his coaching season, and we're probably going to see that when he's with the Los Angeles Clippers. And now, the Colts are in a rough spot. If we can see their seeding for a few seconds, they now fall second best, but about 3.5 games below 500 because they did tie against the Houston Texans around week 2. But they're not looking convincing, and out of a struggling Jacksonville Jaguars team and the Houston Texans that are just plain awful. They have talent, but they're just plain awful. Like, I think I forgot that O.J. Howard's on the team. Matt Ryan is out with a shoulder injury. Tony Brown. There's barely any depth either than their front five. Sam Mellinger from Texas is possibly going to start. That could be the only upside that they have facing off against the goddamn Raiders. But Jonathan Taylor, over his 6 starts, the guy hasn't played since week 6. So we're stuck with Deion Jackson, Nathan Hines, and plus they got Philip Lindsay, that midget. It's absolutely appalling. And people thought that the Colts were actually going to be a threat. Michael Pittman, over his 8 starts, over getting 76 targets and only 54 catches. And they've been playing so conservative, even though they have a talent that can catch. Michael Pittman's only with 1 receiving touchdown in his name since the NFL season started. Alec Pierce, Ashton Dolan, that I was actually with high hopes for, Paris Campbell, barely any depth in the receiving corps. Just an underwhelming offensive line. Ryan can barely even get decent reads with the amount of routes that these guys can't run. And now with a new head coach over the regime, this could actually be the break that the Raiders need if they want to still make some noise in the AFC West. Yeah, but other than that, like, I like a concluding claim over to the Eagles. If they can remain consistent and beat a team like possibly the Titans or the Packers or the Giants, that's been probably the hottest team in pro football, there could be some at least some hype out of the Commanders. Not really in the Commanders game, but some momentum they can swing over or beat the Cowboys one more time. And all because you're an undefeated team doesn't mean that you're always going to be a shoo-in for a championship success. What did the 07 Patriots tell you? Like, what did it tell you when the Arizona Cardinals won 11 straight and then lost 5 of their last 6 games and got shut out in the wild card round? Or when Roethlisberger in his rookie season won 11 straight after a slow start when Cordell Stewart was still their starting quarterback. Or the Patriots when they won at least they were still one of the 3 undefeated teams around the 2018 season, and then they got shut out by the Baltimore Ravens, and then get shut out in the wild card round against the Tennessee Titans that same postseason. So no one's guaranteed to have like a successful season all because you're undefeated for possibly a couple games. Even for half the games, please be more realistic, guys. And I know Eagles fans are happy because they're still the only undefeated team in the NFL. But I bet a lot of people are still going to be like, so who do you think is going to take the Lombardi around? Because we're halfway around the season now. So there's already places that we already have teams in that, with the track record with other teams, who could take the Lombardi? People are probably still going to be like, oh, it's got to be the Cowboys, or it's got to be the Bills, or it's got to be the Ravens, or the Rams got to really pick up the momentum again so they can actually be good, even though we're above the Rams, and now they're 4 games below 500, third in the division. The Arizona Cardinals, the Rams are just swiped out of the conversation now. It's back to the Niners that made it to 2 NFC title games in the last 3 seasons, and the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Chargers. Nobody's thinking about the Eagles other than the momentum that they're getting. And instead of contender, they're just the next hot team. Does that sound like contender to you? Besides that, thanks for watching the DST show. And this podcast is not sponsored. So if you want this to get viewed, because I understand YouTube likes to screw me, subscribe, like, share so this can be spread around, because I know like a minority or always notified whenever a content creator that they subscribe to uploads. So that will spread the word. Thanks for watching the DST show. That's it for me.